Denberg, and this is KUTX at home. And making himself at home in a studio in Nashville is our friend Steve Earle, whose new album, Ghosts of West Virginia, is out on Friday. Really good to see you, my friend.
It's good to see you.
You are set up at a friend's home today?
Yeah, just Joel Habishaw has a studio in his house. I do not possess the bandwidth in my house in Nashville to stream anything live, and it's just I can do just enough. It's like it's a DSL line. I can do like Zoom fast enough to do homeschooling for my kid, and that's pretty much it. Once you get music in it, it's too many ones and zeros, and it all shuts down. It's one of those things. So we, both of us have been kind of, like. We've been pretty quarantined for a long time, and most of the stuff we've done to support the record, where I've had to do live music, I've come here, and it's just me and Joel, and we're not sick, and we've both been following the rules and wearing masks and gloves when we're supposed to, and it's just this is another state like Texas that they've decided to open up and before it, and it wasn't really closed for that long, so it's some concern. I left New York on the 18th, when first the show I was in, Coal Country, which 6 of these songs on this record were written for Coal Country, which Jessica Blank and Eric Jensen wrote. It was up at the Public Theater. We had a hit on our hands. And then Broadway closed, and we closed the same day. And the day after that, John Henry's school closed. And the day after that, the gyms closed. And that was it. I headed for Tennessee. So it was one of those things, because it was a little bit easier place to just sort of hole up with John Henry for the duration.
You're always such a ball of energy, and I know you're homeschooling John Henry part of the week. How else are you spending your time at home? I understand you practice yoga in the mornings.
That's been going for about 5 years now. It's kind of one of those, sort of the last part of my, my 12-step thing to catch up was that, the spiritual part of it. It's stuff I've known about, and I don't, I believe in God. I don't know anybody took real lysergic acid diethylmide at 25 that doesn't believe in God, but I just didn't have a real serious spiritual practice as the way it started. And I went for my 60th birthday, Danny Goldberg took me to Maui to meet Ram Dass. And that was really the beginning of it. And the teacher that I had in New York teaches at the Ram Dass retreats. And it kind of started, and it turned into a real Ashtanga practice. And, I practice 6 days a week. There's a Sabbath on Saturdays, so I don't practice Saturdays unless travel messes that up. And it is good physical exercise. That's not why I do it. For physical exercise, there's an elliptical machine at the house in Tennessee. I got a house here I've had since 1988. My business manager calls it the Alamo because it survived six divorces. But it's not, there's an elliptical machine there. There's a swimming pool there. I bought a trampoline since I've been here the last few weeks for John Henry, and I'm on it as much as he is, and that's pretty good exercise too. So I've been writing some songs. I've been writing a couple of songs for a television show that I can't quite talk about yet, and I've written. I wrote a melody and recorded a track for Mike Scott's making sort of a B project for a Waterboys record he's working on. That's a song cycle about Dennis Hopper. And he decided that his melody wasn't American enough, and he was right. And he sent it to me, and I redid the melody, and I ended up singing it on the record. So I did that since I've been here, and sent it off to Mike. And the stuff that you can do, sitting in your house now, the technology is such that you can do, a lot of amazing things without actually being in. But for me, I can't live stream, so I have to come to a recording studio to do that.
You mentioned your youngest son, John Henry, and that you're homeschooling him. Was there a big learning curve to teach a child with autism at home?
It's the same for anybody that has a child that's not like a totally self-starting teenager or something. All the parents you hear when they're talking about homeschooling online, they're probably sitting there to keep the child in the chair in one form or another. It's a little more involved. I mean, luckily, Allison lives here. So normally he would have been coming right now this week to spend the summer with Allison while I toured. Now, obviously, I'm not doing that. So the first, since March when we got here, we split the week pretty much in half. I had him 4 days. She had him 3. I did 2 days of the homeschooling. She did 3 of them. Now he's at Allison's during the week, and we're switching over to live tutors because the tutors that we had hired have stayed quarantined enough. We feel safe enough, at least for the time being, to start him with a hands-on teacher in the same room. And he needs it as fast as we can get there. But yeah, I know more about the way my little boy learns and the way that he's taught than I did before. It was really hard and it took up half the day, but it's a blessing because I know way more about it now than I did before. So.
You mentioned writing, working on some songs, and you've published poetry and fiction, but are you actually writing your memoirs these days as well?
I'm writing a memoir right now. That's kind of the book project. I was supposed to have turned it in a long time ago, and I spent most of the money, so I need to finish it. So it's harder, man. You know, when I was working on the novel, that took long enough, but it was I didn't know that my cross-dressing ex-football star, you know, prostitute was going to shoot my priest until the night before it happened. On the memoir, I know how all this stuff goes, so it's kind of harder to, you know, make myself sit in the seat and do it. I'm writing a part of the book now that I'm spending a lot of time in Houston right now, you know, at the Old Quarter and Sand Mountain, and a little at Anderson Fair, but I got banned from there pretty quickly simply because Towns was. So I have less history there than I did the other venues in that city. But a lot of Houston, a lot of Austin in it right now, and the part of the book that I'm working on right now.
I actually live in the neighborhood where Towns lived in Clarksville, so
it was very different then, you know. And the old Clarksville, that's old Clarksville that you're seeing in Heartworn Highways, where Towns has got the trailer, living in the trailer, and Uncle Seymour Washington was there, and that was the first person to go up there and build a nice house, buy a lot in Clarksville that I know of, was a guy named Minor Wilson, who was Guy Clark's partner in a guitar repair business in a shop in San Francisco. They moved to the West Coast together, and Minor bought and built this kind of, if I remember correctly, it was basically a wooden yurt up at the top of Clarksville, and down at the bottom was still dirt roads, chickens running around, and trailers, and the last of the shotgun shacks that were originally built in the old Clarksville neighborhood.
It's a great neighborhood. You've got your banjo ready. I want to talk about the new album, and then we can play a song. It comes out Friday, Ghosts of West Virginia. It's about the Upper Big Branch coal mine explosion 10 years ago that 29 men perished in. Was your motivation to write this album when the playwrights of Coal Country, which you were talking about at the start, approached you to provide the songs for their play?
Well, I mean, that's what happened, and that's why these particular songs came about. But that was sort of a gift, because what I was doing before Jessica Blank and Eric Jensen called me was I was trying to figure out how to make a record that spoke to, and maybe if I did it right, for people that maybe didn't vote the way that I did, because I've written the Preaching to the Choir record several times, and my politics have not changed a bit. My concern for the environment hasn't changed a bit, but the truth is the divisions between us, I believe, are being exploited by the same powerful people that have always exploited them more than they ever have, because we're more divided than we've ever been. And I think we're in a lot of the trouble we're in right now because we think we don't have any in New York City. We think we don't have anything in common with people in West Virginia. Truth is, West Virginia was the most unionized place in America right up until, you know, the 90s, which was when this particular coal mine belonged to Peabody Coal, which was a union company, and they sold it to a company called Massey Energy, and they opened it up non-union. And this was the very first non-union mine on that mountain, and it blew up and it killed 29 guys. And so that's a lot of that story. So it just sort of fell in my lap. I think this process is not it's not checkers, it's chess. It's the beginning of a dialogue that's going to probably take years for us to start thinking about what we have in common rather than their differences. And I think that's it's way more. We have way more in common than we think we do. And I think way more ways that we're in our lives that are the same. We basically all just want to take care of our kids and take care of our families, and our concerns are really, when it gets right down to it, push come to shove, the same.
The sound of much of this record is bluegrassy, and I remember when you first started recording again with Train a Comin', and then that record you did with Del McCoury, they both had a bluegrass bass.
Right.
So you recorded bluegrass in New York City and mixed in mono.
Yeah, it's one of those things that like I recorded it at Electric Lady because that's my neighborhood recording studio. I made Washington Square Serenade there as well. I've done a lot of my record store day singles, like the two Guy Clark songs that I did in addition to the Guy album last time I did El Coyote and Don't Let the Sunshine Fool You. I did that track at Electric Lady. It's just where I go. It's the only real recording studio left in Manhattan that I know of. And luckily it's 4 blocks from my apartment. So we needed to record in December because I was going into rehearsals for Coal Country in January. And that's the closest thing to a real job I've ever had is being in a play in New York City. It's 6 days a week. It's 8 performances a week, and rehearsals are 7 days a week. So it was a lot of work, and 4 years. It takes 4 years to make theater. It took 3 years to the Richard Maxwell play I did music for season before last, and this was 4 years of first traveling to West Virginia, interviewing the survivors, which means some guys that were there that day that survived and the families of the people that did not. And every word in the play is right out of the mouths of the people that, it's their own story and their own words. I had a little more, room to play with it with the songs that I wrote. So that was just a good thing about my job.
The play Steve's talking about is Coal Country, which had to close when the pandemic hit us. But the new album is out Friday, Ghosts of West Virginia, which I want to talk about a little bit more. But since you've got the banjo handy, which song did you want to do from the album?
Well, there's one banjo song on the record, which is Devil Put the Coal on the Ground. In the show, it happens right at the moment when the mind explodes. It's when everybody's telling their stories about where they were at that moment. And when that last of those testimony goes by, then this song happens. Also, I want to mention that this is a civic exercise as well, because banjo is a really great social distancing tool, I've discovered. It's one of those things. This is Devil Put the Coal on the Ground. Well, the devil put the coal on the ground. Devil put the coal on the ground. Buried it deep, it'll never be found. Devil put the coal on the ground. Said that'll be a diamond someday. That'll be a diamond someday. You'll be long gone, dead anyway. That'll be a diamond someday. Well, the devil put the coal on the ground. Devil put the coal on the ground. Said a double dog day, the parliament down. Devil put the coal in the ground. Hey. Well, good Lord, give me 2 hands. Good Lord, give me 2 hands. Said is you an animal or is you a man? Good Lord, give me 2 hands. Lord, give it and take it away. Lord, give it and take it away. Devil did the same damn hole every day. Lord, give it and take it away. Well, the devil put the coal on the ground. Devil put the coal on the ground. Said a double dog dare you to follow me down. Devil put the coal in the ground. I wake up in the morning and pray. Keep away from my door and the devil at bay. Wake up in the morning and pray. Well, a black clown will kill me someday. Black clown kill me someday. I'm already underground, I reckon anyway. The black clown kill me someday. Well, the devil put the coal in the ground. The devil put the coal in the ground. Said a double dog dare you to follow me down. Devil put the coal in the ground.
Powerful stuff. Powerful album. The album's out Friday, Ghosts of West Virginia from Steve Earle and the Dukes. Devil Put the Coal in the Ground. The Dukes, Steve, are amazing on this record. Lots of folks with Austin connections, of course, the Mastersons. Eleanor takes a great lead vocal on one of the songs. Our friend Ricky Ray Jackson, also Brad Pemberton. But this was your first recording without the longest standing Duke. You worked together for 30 years or so with bassist Kelly Looney, who passed away in November from illness. So it must have been intense to not have him record with you and be with you this time.
Yeah, it was tough. It was like the first record without him, and it happened pretty quickly because he started getting ill last summer on the road, and it was interstitial lung disease, which can be caused by a lot of things. Black lung, for instance, is a form of interstitial lung disease. Cystic fibrosis is a form of interstitial lung. Basically means your lungs are drying out, and what was causing it was probably a rare but not unheard of reaction to a high dose of statins, because Kelly had a stroke a couple of years ago and his cholesterol wasn't coming down, which was, more about cupcakes than it was a lot of things. He was just one of those guys. He baked. He was a pastry chef, and they couldn't get his cholesterol down where they wanted, so they doubled the dose of statins. And he started to have trouble breathing very shortly after that. He missed the show in Houston on the Guy tour because he just had gotten so short of breath. He got worried. He spent the night at Methodist. They didn't catch it. They said, "Oh, your heart's okay," and they let him go. We finished the tour a month later. He barely got through. And then we were getting ready to go to Hardly Strictly Bluegrass the first week in October. And he just said, "I can't go," and went in the hospital and never came out again. And he passed away in November. So we're booked in to make this record. And the way the business works nowadays, of course, the pandemic has turned everything on its ear, but we didn't know that was going to happen. So it is largely based on me putting a record out so that I can go out and tour, and that's how I make a living. So I needed, to just keep going and make this record, and I wanted the record in the can before I took off the road to be involved in coal country, the rehearsals, and I was actually in the show. I was sort of the orchestra and a Greek chorus with a guitar and a banjo for the run of the show. So we've been I'd known, I'd known Jeff Hill for a while because he was in the Chris Robinson Brotherhood, and I played with him in some other situations. And I called him, and he suited up and showed up. He lives in upstate New York, so he came down and met us at Electric Lady, and I'm proud to say he is a Duke now. And but it was tough. It was he had been in the band since 1988. His first record with us was Copperhead Road. I remember like yesterday. I hired him at Brown's Diner here in Nashville, Tennessee, in late 1987. He went over to Memphis with us to make Copperhead, and I hadn't been on the stage without Kelly Looney with the Dukes since then, until I guess the Outlaw Country Cruise was the first gigs that we had to actually do without Kelly.
Well, gratitude from a fan to Kelly. I've spent decades watching him with you. He gave me a lot of smiles, and I know his spirit is on the record, Ghosts of West Virginia. I was looking at the album cover. Your album covers have this great continuity with the artwork. Is it one gentleman who's been doing your album covers for all these years?
Yeah, his name's Tony Fitzpatrick. He lives in Chicago. He's sort of the epitome of a South Sider, but his mother literally scrubbed floors and got him art lessons, and he's a great draftsman, great artist, and it began with I Feel All Right. I'd known Tony since the 80s. He had a radio show in Chicago, and he was at the very first show I played at Park West in 1986, and we've been friends since then. And I started asking him, to do the album covers beginning with I Feel All Right. And he's done all of them. He's also done the dust jackets out to both books. He did posters for all of our productions when I had a theater company here in Nashville before I moved to New York. And he's the only thing I do, the Record Store Day singles beginning last time around, I started using my own artwork for those things. But the rest of it, I wrap my art in Tony Fitzpatrick's art. I have for years.
Well, it's a great continuity. We were talking a little bit earlier about Townes Van Zandt. You grew up outside San Antonio, made it to Houston looking to find Townes. But when you got to Nashville, you played bass in Guy Clark's band and sang on Old Number One. You've done an album of Guy songs. You've done an album of Townes songs. What I'm leading to is last year, you taped your fifth Austin City Limits. It was a tribute to Guy Clark. Man, that was so great. And I choke up thinking about it when you guys came out for Old Friends at the end with Joe Ely, Rodney Crowell, Terry and Joe Harvey Allen. That was a moment, man.
Yeah, it was for me. I wish the only thing, there was a couple of people like Vince Gill was off in Europe being an Eagle, so he wasn't there on the record or at Austin City Limits, and that's a regret. There were a few people that just weren't around and we couldn't get them there, but it just I'm glad the people that did show up. Jerry Jeff just was his voice just wasn't back, to a point where he felt comfortable with coming. So he sat it out. I really missed him that night. It's one of those deals. So um I that's the first time I was in the same room with Towns. I crashed Jerry Jeff Walker's, I think, 33rd birthday party, and he played Castle Creek, and I overheard John Inman telling somebody where the party was going to be, and I lied to this girl and said that we were invited because I'd hitchhiked there from San Antonio, and I went out there, and there's Jerry Jeff was there, B.W. Stevenson was there, Rusty Weir was there. God, who else? It was kind of mind blowing. Like all my heroes that I'd been going to see play in Texas for a while. It was Milton Carroll was there, Billy C was there. It was pretty mind. And Towns came blowing in about halfway through, and like started a beautiful buckskin jacket that Jerry Jeff had given him for his birthday, because their birthdays are about 10 days apart. And he started a dice game, lost every dime he had and the jacket, and then left. And he had this really pretty girl with him. And I thought, my hero. That was sort of one of the. I started stalking Towns at that point.
Well, even though you make your homes in Nashville and or New York, it always circles back to Texas. And I just felt honored to be in the room that night at the ACL for the taping of your Guy tribute and to see all those people
It
on.
was the best we could have hoped for that project, and I have to thank Terry Lacona for that, because I called him. I just made I didn't wait for somebody else to do it. When I started working on the Guy record, when I finished it, basically, I called Terry and I just said, "Look, I've made a record of Guy Clark songs, and I know you're starting to put the season together, but just keep me in mind for this, because I think it's." I think it should be on Austin City Limits. And Guy's first appearance on Austin City Limits was in the first season, and I just we did it. We were supposed to be part of a split episode with Patty Griffin, like they usually are. And then I got a call from Terry the next day after what happened that day. He just said, "You know what? We're going to give it the whole. It's a Guy Clark tribute. We're going to give it the whole hour, and we're going to stick some Guy footage from his earlier appearances in at the end of it." And I just couldn't, for that project. That was a grand slam. That was the best I could have hoped for artistically for that project, was the way ending with that Austin City Limits.
Well, it really warmed not just my heart, but I think anyone that watched it on TV as well. And another thing that warmed my heart, I'll come full circle in this conversation, is at the beginning when we were talking about this album and the people who you're singing about, the coal miners. I guess 68% of West Virginians voted for the current administration. You did not, but you made this record that speaks to their lives. How do you come upon that empathy? Because I have a hard time finding it sometimes these days.
Well, because I think you have to make yourself come to it, because the fact of the matter is, being angry at people in West Virginia for voting for Donald Trump is kind of stupid, because it's not even just about Donald Trump. It's look, Hillary Clinton went to West Virginia and she said, "I'm going to close the coal mines down," and then 10 days later, Donald Trump went and said he wouldn't. Now, I think both people were lying to those people. I think both people, neither one actually had the power to close the coal mines, and the reason the coal mines aren't going to close has to do with money, and it has to do with all of us collectively becoming responsible about the environment. Meanwhile, we're taking coal out of the ground, and we're taking oil out of the ground, and we're making steel, and we're doing these things, and these jobs are dangerous. And these guys died because they were in the first non-union mine on that mountain. And I really, truly believe that. There'd been a union there to keep that mine safe, all those guys would be alive watching their grandkids play out in their front yards right now as we speak. And it's just, you don't, they're people. If we keep thinking, you know what my politics are, and you know who I voted for, and I didn't vote for an alternative candidate either. I voted for Hillary Clinton because I didn't want to waste my vote, and that's the way that I saw it. But the fact of the matter is that if we keep believing that everyone that voted for Donald Trump is a racist or is mean, then we're in trouble, because it's simply not true. There are a lot of people that just voted for what seemed like the best thing for them and their livelihoods and their lives and taking care of their children in their part of the country. In West Virginia, not everybody's working in coal. It's a relatively small number of people, because not everybody can do it. Number one, they paid real good money. They were smart about this, but all of the shifts became 12 hours, no lunch break. You work with a sandwich in a pocket and a pop in the other pocket, and the long wall machine, which is a big, huge machine that was taking, in this particular case of this particular mine, $600,000 worth of coal out of the ground every single day. So the people that owned it didn't want to stop it because they were getting rich. And it's a little empathy. The job is empathy, and my job, and the idea that until we start trying to figure out what we have in common with people that live in West Virginia or people that live in Michigan who are no longer working in auto plants, or people, people on either coast have way more to in common with West Virginians than they think they do, and vice versa, I think is the end all and be all of all this to me.
Well, it's a great album. It's a great story, but just even if you don't immerse yourself in the story viscerally, this is a great record to listen to. And it's called Ghosts of West Virginia, and it's new from Steve Earle. And Steve, I hope that when things get to where they're going to be, where you can come out and play again, that you'll be able to do that and make a living and bring this story to the world. And I look forward to
my intention is not to let this record go until I get these people's stories told. So next summer, I believe we're going to be out there playing for people next summer, and we're going to be playing this album the way that we intended to this summer.
I'll look for you there.
Thanks.
Thank you, Steve Earle. Such a
Jody.
good man, such a good writer, such a good human. Steve Earle and the Dukes, the new album Ghosts of West Virginia is out Friday. The Hardcore Troubadour. My thanks, friend.
Thank you.